1,450 tons of stone, sitting on a foundation less than 10 feet deep, on ground so soft that in some spots you can push your finger straight into it. That's how the Leaning Tower of Pisa was standing in 1990, right before a team of engineers shut it down, because it was about to fall. The math said it would collapse if nobody stepped in. And yet right now, while you're watching this, it's still standing. 850 years, it survived wars, fires, 11 years closed, while engineers operated on it like a patient in surgery, and it survived something that should have destroyed it centuries ago. Earthquakes, 4 major earthquakes, 0 damage. Here's what nobody tells you in that tourist photo, the one where someone pretends to hold it up. The thing that almost killed this tower while it was being built is probably the same thing keeping it alive today. In the next few minutes, you'll understand 3 things. Why ground that's too weak to hold up a building can also be the one thing that saves it from an earthquake. Why the biggest attempt to straighten this tower involved removing dirt from underneath it, which sounds crazy, until you hear why it worked. And why, after 850 years, the same engineers who saved it in 2001 signed off saying it'll stand for 200 more. By the end of this video, you won't just see a leaning tower. You'll see the most backwards building ever built by accident. Let's start at the beginning. Pisa, the year 1173. The city is rich, proud, and powerful. It wants a bell tower that people can see from the sea. So they start building. A tall stone tower on ground that looks solid from the top. It isn't. Underneath is a mix of clay, sand, and old seashells, soil so weak it shifts unevenly all the way down to 230 feet. And the foundation holding up this whole tower? Less than 10 feet deep. Picture sticking a beach umbrella into wet sand and expecting it to hold up a telephone pole. That's the size of the mistake. Before the 3rd floor was even finished, the tower was already leaning north. The builders watched it happen with their own eyes. Here's the first twist. That mistake almost fixed itself, not because of smart engineering, because of something completely human. Pisa goes to war, first against Genoa, then Lucca, then Florence. Construction stops, not for a year, not for 5, for almost 100 years. And during that century of silence, something happens that no one planned. The soil, under all that weight, slowly starts to pack down, to get stronger. The war that should have ruined this tower ends up giving it exactly the time it needed to survive. But the tilt didn't go away. When construction finally starts again, the tower is still crooked, so the builders make a choice. One that any engineer today would instantly recognize, because it's the same idea used to save another leaning building you've already heard about on this channel. They start building the top floors a little straighter, to cancel out the lean, like bending a pencil the other way to make it look straight. The result? The tower doesn't end up straight. It ends up slightly curved, like a giant stone banana. And that's why, when you look at it from the side today, the Leaning Tower of Pisa doesn't lean in a straight line. It bends. By 1372, almost 200 years after the first stone, the tower is finished. And for the next 600 years, it does the only thing it can do: keep leaning. Very slowly. So slowly, almost nobody notices from one generation to the next. In 1350, the tilt was barely 1.5 degrees. Sounds harmless, right? Here's the problem. The more something tilts, the more dangerous each extra degree becomes. It's not a straight increase. It speeds up. There's a point where a leaning building's own weight stops holding it up and starts pulling it down instead. Engineers call that the critical angle. By 1990, Pisa was getting dangerously close to it. By then, the tower was leaning 5.5 degrees, with the top sticking out more than 16 feet from straight. Studies at the time said there was a 50 to 100% chance the tower would collapse, if nobody acted fast. So Italy shuts it down. A team of 13 experts is formed: structural engineers, soil scientists, art historians, led by a British engineer named John Burland. Their job sounds simple. It wasn't. Stop a 1,400-ton tower from falling without making it obvious you touched it. You can't straighten it completely. That would ruin what makes it famous. But you also can't leave it alone because it's going to fall. Here's the part that sounds insane until you understand it. Burland's team decides the way to save the tower is to remove dirt, not add support, not use steel, not pour concrete. Remove dirt. They drill a series of angled tubes under the north side, the side opposite the direction it's leaning, and start pulling out tiny amounts of soil, bit by bit. It sounds backwards. Your first instinct says, removing dirt from under a sinking building should make things worse. But here's the logic. When you pull soil out from the north side, that side sinks just slightly, and that pulls the tower back towards straight, away from the dangerous angle on the south side. It's the same idea as fixing a wobbly table, not by adding something under the short leg, by shaving down the long one. The work happens between 1999 and 2001. Computer models track every bit of soil removed. Sensors monitor the tower's movement, almost hour by hour. By the end, the tower straightens by about 15 inches. The tilt drops from 5.5 degrees to just under 4. On paper, that's barely a 1% change. But in terms of risk, that's the difference between a condemned building and a safe one. On June 16, 2001, the tower is officially handed back to the city. That December, after 11 years closed, it reopens to the public. And the same team of experts signs a statement most engineers rarely dare to write: that the tower will stay stable for at least 200 more years. You'd think that's the end of the story, a building saved right before collapse. But there's a question that 2001 team couldn't answer, a question that had been a mystery for way longer. And it's actually more unsettling than the sinking itself. How has this tower survived earthquakes? Think about it. This is a building that can barely hold itself up, built on weak ground, with a huge, heavy top leaning way off to one side. On paper, this is exactly the kind of building an earthquake should destroy in seconds. And yet, since the year 1280, the region around Pisa has had at least 4 major earthquakes. The tower was standing, already leaning, through every single one. Not one of them caused visible damage. For decades, this was a real, unsolved mystery. The answer came in 2018, and it connects to something you probably already know, if you've seen this channel's video on why buildings collapse in earthquakes. A team of 16 researchers, led by Professor Camillo Nuti and Professor George Mylonakis, studied years of earthquake and soil data on the tower. And what they found is one of those twists that only real engineering can produce. The same soft soil that almost destroyed the tower while it was being built. The same soil that forced it to close in 1990 is also the reason it survived every earthquake for 700 years. Scientists call this soil structure interaction. But you already know the basic idea if you saw the Venezuela earthquake video. Every building has its own natural rhythm, like a tuning fork. When the ground shakes at the same rhythm as the building, they lock in together, and the building breaks. In Pisa, the opposite happens. The height and stiffness of the tower, combined with how soft the ground is, means the soil acts like a giant filter. Instead of sending the earthquakes shaking straight into the tower, the soft ground soaks up most of that energy before it ever reaches the top. According to the study, this effect can cut down the shaking the tower actually feels by a huge amount, compared to the same tower built on solid rock. Professor Mylonakis said it best. The same soil that almost destroyed this tower is the same soil that saved it. Think about what that really means. If someone built this exact same tower on solid, stable ground back in the 1100s, it would probably be standing straight today. But it probably wouldn't exist at all, because a medieval earthquake would have destroyed it centuries ago. The foundation mistake that made this tower famous by accident is the same mistake that kept it alive when everything else should have brought it down. And that leaves us with a lesson that goes way beyond one tower in Italy. In engineering, there's no such thing as a flaw that's always bad. There are only flaws that depend on the situation. Soft ground is a death sentence for a heavy, stiff building that wasn't built for it. But that same soft ground, combined with the right shape, can become the cheapest shock absorber on Earth. Similar to the earthquake protection systems that cost millions of dollars to install in modern skyscrapers. Except in Pisa, nature installed it for free. 850 years ago, pure luck. Today, the tower is still standing, still watched down to the millimeter, and according to the latest reports, it's actually straightening a tiny bit every year, before it starts leaning again, decades from now, according to their own math. But so slowly, it won't be a problem for anyone alive today. Pisa has spent an entire century living with the fear of losing its most famous building, and they fixed it, not with force, but by understanding exactly how the ground beneath it behaves. So next time you see that tourist photo, someone pretending to hold up the tower with their hand, think about this. You're not looking at a mistake that got lucky. You're probably looking at the oldest example in the world of something engineers only figured out on purpose 700 years later. Sometimes you don't fight the weakness beneath you. You learn to live with it, and it might just save your life. If you're into famous buildings, real engineering failures, and why they happen, subscribe. There's a new one every time.